All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, as I watched Kyrie Irving play for the Boston Celtics in last year's playoffs, particularly in the second round against the Milwaukee Bucks, I couldn't help but to think, as I watched him miss shot after shot, particularly from games 2 to 5, that it almost seemed as if he started to miss shots on purpose after he realized that the Celtics were not going to defeat the Milwaukee Bucks, so that he could make his misery come to an end even sooner. As a matter of fact, I will not put it past him. I will not put it past him at all, because there were shots that he was putting up that were bricking or airballing that he can make in his sleep with his eyes closed, even if he were awake. The only question that I have, and that the Brooklyn Nets should have as well, is whether or not he's going to bring that same level of toxicity over to the Brooklyn Nets. One would assume that he would not. Now, it's not good to assume, but in order to sign a contract with a player, making him therefore a contractor with your organization for 3 or 4 years, you do have to include a bit of assumption in your reasoning. That being that he is going to bring his best version of himself with him over to the franchise. That's what you would hope. But they say that it's very difficult to change someone. And when they're put in certain conditions of adversity, they're going to show you who they really are. So that's going to be the question for Mr. Kyrie Irving. That is going to be the referendum that he will be put through over the course of these next 3 or 4 years, however long he's with the Brooklyn Nets. Who is the real Kyrie Irving? Is he the person who has always shown that he can rise to the occasion, especially in pressurized situations? Or is he the spoiled brat who starts to pop when things don't go his way, who thinks that he's a 6'2" Kobe Bryant as opposed to being the point guard that he needs to be to make his teammates the best version of themselves? That's truly the responsibility of the best player on a team, to make all the other members of your squad the best versions of themselves. That's the difference between a great talent and a great player. Michael Jordan was a great talent in the 80s, but he was a great player in the 90s. And if you notice, all his stats came down. Can Kyrie Irving accept that? Isaiah Thomas, and I say this over and over again, in the early 80s, he had seasons where he was averaging 21, 22 points a game, 12, 13, 14 assists a game. But when his team started to compete for world championships, his points per game dropped under 20, and even his assists per game dropped under 10. Can Kyrie grasp that? Can he understand? Can he comprehend that in order for the Brooklyn Nets to become the best version of themselves, that 25 point per game average is probably going to have to come down to about 20 points per game? And maybe his assists should come up a little bit, depending on the style of offense that they play. Most of the teams in the NBA today play a hybrid of the Golden State and San Antonio Spurs style of offense. Back in the day, you would have maybe 4 or 5 guys average 9 to 10 assists per game. And then the league leader, normally John Stockton, would average somewhere around 12 assists per game. You don't really see that anymore because the point guards don't dominate the basketball like they used to. But just to get back to the point, this is going to be a referendum on Kyrie Irving these next 3 to 4 years. Because for the first time in his life, or at least in his professional life, he is where he wants to be. He is where he chose to be. He didn't choose to be in Cleveland. He didn't choose to be in Boston. He has chosen to be with the Brooklyn Nets. So not only is this going to be a great test for him, it's also going to be a great test for their coach as well. Because the coach of the Brooklyn Nets is going to have to do something that Brad Stevens was scared to do. That being coach and challenge Kyrie Irving and not be scared of him. These great players, once they see that a coach is scared of them, they lose all respect for them. So anyway, they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
Come on, everybody. Welcome back to First Take, coming to you live from the Seaport District at Pier 17, brought to you by Chase. Kyrie Irving expected to join Kevin Durant in Brooklyn, according to our Adrian Wojnarowski, the all-star point guard, criticized often about his leadership with the Celtics. Many believe Boston was actually better without him.
No, they were not better without him, and they're going to find that out next year, that they're not going to be better without him, but they will be happier without him. So I expect the Boston Celtics to have somewhere around the same record that they had last season, about 48 to 50 wins. And I do think that the young players are going to play better with more exuberance. And Kemba Walker, of course, is much more congenial than Kyrie. Kyrie sometimes takes himself a bit too seriously. He styles himself as some type of philosopher. We know that he is into Hermeticism, which is just a modern form of the Babylonian Kemetic Mystery School system. I'll be covering that in another video in detail pertaining to Mr. Kyrie Irving. I told you brothers last season that it was very obvious that Kyrie is a witch. As many players in the NBA are, It's just that he chose to be transparent about it. But anyway, just getting back to the point. I expect the Celtics to be very competitive next year because Kemba is much more coachable. And Kemba's been in the league now for 8 years. He's gone through many losing seasons. So he's going to receive the messages of Brad Stevens with far more ease than Kyrie Irving did. Remember, Kyrie Irving stated that he's a basketball genius. He said that. So for someone to say that publicly, what they're telling you in a roundabout way is, I'm uncoachable or relatively uncoachable. And we've had great players in the NBA over the past 20, 25 years who are relatively uncoachable, like Kobe Bryant, like Allen Iverson, hell, even like LeBron James. Most of these guys are uncoachable, and I'm sure that what they have in common is that they will all tell you that they're basketball geniuses.
Max, let me ask you this. Are you confident the Nets will not see, we're going to call him problem Kyrie?
No, I'm not confident about that.
No, you shouldn't be confident about that because that's a part of who he is. That's a part of the fiber of his being. Kyrie is a relatively tempestuous individual, very problematic, or at least to a degree problematic, because he is relatively intelligent. He's just not as smart as he thinks he is. And that can that can create issues because you start to question things that are pretty straightforward just for the sake of questioning them. And that's part of the time period that we're in. Everybody associates questioning everything with being intelligent, and that's not the case. Sometimes you question everything because you're not that damn smart.
Let me be very clear. I believe Kyrie is going to kill it in Brooklyn. I've said on the show many times at this point, maybe the most skillful player who ever lived.
Offensively, he's up there. If you talk about handle, shooting off the dribble, shooting off the catch, finishing with the right or left hand, free throw shooting, clutch shooting, Kyrie's up there with anybody who's ever played. There's no doubt about that.
He's from the area and he's got the situation he wants. He's going to put on a show you don't want to miss at Barclays Center 41 times during the regular season, and he's going to be killing it in the playoffs. But I can't sit here and say I'm confident problem Kyrie won't show up. He has not shown in the past consistently over real length of time that he can be just the lunch pail guy who doesn't ever cause a problem. When you sit down for a national interview to try to squash problems in the locker room, you're actually doing the opposite. Now, maybe he's learned from all these things, right?
I doubt it.
He has. And I think he'll kill it. But I can't sit here honestly, like you put me on a lie detector test, be like, you're confident you're not going to see problem Kyrie? I can't be confident in that, Stephen A., because past is prologue. He hasn't shown that yet. I hope he can, but I can't say I'm confident.
I'm very confident. I'm not worried about Kyrie one bit because this is the first time that Kyrie had a choice. It's his decision. He was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers. He had to force his way out, but he didn't pick Boston. Dan Gilbert and the Cleveland Cavaliers chose Boston.
Agreed and agreed.
When he was in Boston for the last 2 seasons, he dealt with what he dealt with. This is the first time in his life, in his professional career, he's been free, making a decision that was all his choice. And I remember I asked a couple of sources last night, why not the Lakers, especially if you got a chance to be there, because Kawhi's not going there. And I was told he wants to be near his family and loved ones. It matters. And when you look at Kevin Durant, what...
Right, but is that the real reason why he did not give the Lakers a chance? I mean, it's kind of the default answer that I want to be closer to my family and friends, when the real reason is that he has a personnel issue with the LA Lakers, that being LeBron James. That's why I told you, brothers, from last season, when Kyrie started going off about how he learned so much about the situation between himself and LeBron and how it related to the situation between himself and the young players on Boston, he was only using LeBron James as a pawn. And it would not shock me if he came up with that stratagem at the behest or upon the instruction of Mr. Kobe Bryant, who may have told him to think of a strategy like that as a way to subvert a lot of the nonsense and the immaturity of some of his younger teammates, who themselves were dealing with a slightly less immature Kyrie Irving.
The only reason, I mean, think about this. You lose out on $60 million. You're automatically an elite championship contender, still arguably the favorite if Kevin Durant is in Golden State and regains his health. Okay, you got championships, you've got money, you've got great teammates in Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, or whatever, but you're left. Why? Because something was missing. And, you know, they operated as a unit. We all know the Golden State Warriors are a first-class organization, but Kevin Durant marched to his own beat, his own tune. Wasn't about not getting along with anybody or anything like that, but he's a different beast. But clearly very, very close to Kyrie. When the New York Knicks had approached Kevin Durant's team, and they talked about, you know what, we want you that bad. Who do you want with you?
Let me say this very quickly pertaining to the rapport or the relationship between Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. As I cite often on this channel, the scriptures tell us, can two walk together unless they be in agreement? So we know that Kyrie Irving is into Hermeticism. He's immersed in the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system and its edicts, its ideologies. So one must assume that Kevin Durant is also interested in the same thing.
Okay, and they brought up Kemba Walker in the event that Kyrie Irving went to Brooklyn. And Kemba Walker is a security blanket because we know what Kemba Walker brings to the table. What did KD say? Nope, no can do. He was only interested in playing with one dude, and that was Kyrie Irving, because they're tight. And so when you look at it from that perspective, we can look at the young guys, we can look at the talent the Brooklyn Nets have, but clearly this franchise has been handed to KD and Kyrie. So you're the leader of the franchise, A, and B, you're playing with somebody who's your boy. Not that you don't have a good relationship with LeBron now, but the relationship with LeBron now is arguably better than the relationship was when LeBron first returned to Cleveland, and y'all have to cultivate the relationship. There's more of a respect here. You miss each other, etc., etc. Him and KD have been friends for years. They get along tremendously well. They trust one another. Obviously, they're going to be the face of the franchise, and I think those things ensure that Kyrie will not be a problem at all.
Well, here's my problem with your theory, Stephen A. Smith. And I've stated this already. It's very difficult to ascertain to what level a relationship will devolve into until the two parties are in the same environment for an elongated period of time. It's one thing to link up at the All-Star game or hang out in Miami and be around the hoes. It's a whole other thing to work together in a corporate environment. The NBA is just a corporate environment. That's really what it is. There is a hierarchy. There is a structure there. And when you're talking about Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, those are two individuals who seem to buck up against authority, if not immediately, after a certain period of time. And if they're unable to verify exactly who the leader of the team is and who should be taking the last shot or shots in the game, I promise you that their relationship, their quote-unquote friendship, will dissolve. They both have shown that they're pretty much, maybe too much alike. They're too simpatico. And sometimes it's not good when you have two people in an environment who are too much alike. They start to seek after the same things. When Kevin Durant was in Golden State, what made the relationship between him and Steph Curry work so well is that Steph Curry would take a back seat when he needed to. Steph Curry was so secure in himself as a man and as a basketball player that he let KD cook. He let him work. He let him do his thing. Because that was his way of saying, you're a guest in my home. And anyone who's a great host is going to make a guest feel like, to a degree, that they have run of the crib because you want them to feel comfortable. That was still not enough for Kevin Durant. As we know with Kyrie, no matter what he's been given in Cleveland or Boston, it was not enough for him. So now you have two individuals who both been champions on previous teams who were still not satisfied with their accomplishments coming together in a franchise that has never won anything. So is there a combustibility factor there? I believe that there is.
And I hope you're right. Can I take a pause from the argument for a second,
Sure.
the debate for a second, to just say this about Kyrie?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's actually the star here. Kate?
Well, I would say that he's the alpha. When I say the alpha, I believe everything is going to run through him when it comes to decision making. How long Kevin Durant will tolerate that, who knows? I will say that Kevin Durant is the star, but Kyrie is the alpha. It's going to be a very similar situation as what we saw in OKC with Westbrook and Durant. Now, the only question is, have Kyrie and Durant matured enough to understand that in order for them to be functional, they're going to have to work together and let each other play out their role? Can KD grasp that just because you can bring the ball up does not mean that you should? Just because you can initiate the offense does not mean that you should be fighting to do so every single time. We saw him have these issues in Golden State where he would just bogart the offense and go 1-on-5, and Steph and Clay would just sit back or stand in the corner and let him work. That showed their level of magnanimity when dealing with him. Because as we saw in just this last year's playoffs, they can get cooking as well, Steph and Clay. They're not chicken dinners. They're not chop suey. So what's going to happen when you put a Kevin Durant on the same team with a Kyrie Irving and they both want to play hero ball down the stretch? We know that Kyrie Irving believes that he's a 6'2" Kobe Bryant. That means that he has the Mamba mentality. That means that he has to take every single big shot. Is he going to have the wherewithal to actually be able to execute an offense in a clutch situation as opposed to just going one-on-one and having KD stand in the corner, upset, angry, and clapping his hands? Because, once again, that was the genesis of the blow-up with Draymond.
We have to see how he responds. You heard Chuck say, yeah, Dominique came back, but he wasn't the human highlight reel anymore. No one's ever...
Well, here's the issue with Charles Barkley, who stated that when Dominique Wilkins came back, he was never the same. He was just a player on Boston. As usual, Charles Barkley's memory is off. Because when Dominique came back initially from the torn Achilles tendon, he was a top scorer once again in the NBA. I don't think that the Achilles issue is going to be a problem for KD. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure he's going to lose a step. It might take him a year to get that step back. But Kevin Durant is 7 feet tall, and he's one of the top 3 pure shooters in the NBA. He's not going to have a problem scoring. And it might actually work out for the Brooklyn Nets that he's going to be hampered and maybe even compromised for the remainder of his career, because it might give him some of the scope to allow other players to take big shots. Who knows?
Come back committed 100%. Kyrie, people have to understand, Brooklyn has a team. 7 years ago, the first time Brooklyn had a Major League basketball team. First Major League franchise in Brooklyn since the Dodgers left, right? You know, what's New York known for in terms of basketball, Stephen A? What's New York known for? Handles. Street ball handles is what the city is known for, right? Who has the best handles who ever lived? I'm going to argue it's Kyrie Irving.
Let me say this also. It's very rare that you encounter a player with his level of handle that's also a great pure shooter off the dribble. Very rare.
It's pretty clear it's Kyrie Irving. Best handles of all time.
Yeah, you've always said that.
From the area, playing in Brooklyn. The problem with New York ball is it's all handles and no one shoots. Kyrie can shoot the lights out. Kyrie is one of the best shooters in the NBA.
Yeah, but
shooters in the NBA.
But see, the only reason I challenge you on that.
People forget that Kyrie Irving won a 3-point shooting contest in the NBA.
Because as somewhat of a basketball historian, what I would ask you to do is appreciate those who paved the way for the guy to come up. Shamgar.
I was going to bring up
Kenny Anderson. I mean, come on now.
I'm glad
Dwayne Pearl Washington.
See what you just did? You interrupted and stole my thunder. I wanted to.
He also created a red herring that was unnecessary. We're talking about Kyrie Irving. We're not talking about a lot of those other guys. And a lot of them were flops. I mean, if we want to check back at the history of the point guard who had a great handle and also could score, then we go to Tim Hardaway. We go to Isaiah Thomas, not Kenny Anderson. I remember Kenny Anderson at Georgia Tech. He was a sensation in his freshman year. He was very good in his sophomore year. I remember his freshman year, I believe that was Dennis Scott's last year. They had that 3-man team of Kenny Anderson, Dennis Scott, and Brian Oliver, and I think they got to the Elite 8, maybe even the Final 4, but they were a very exciting team at a time when college basketball was just about as exciting as the NBA. For those who remember that time period in college basketball, late 80s, early 90s, you had Alonzo Mourning and Dikembe Mutombo at Georgetown. You had Billy Owens at Syracuse. Very exciting time. Of course, you had the Duke Blue Devils. You had the Fab Five. Very fun time to be watching basketball, college basketball at that time. Jimmy Jackson at Ohio State, Calbert Cheaney at Indiana.
God Shamgar, okay? God Shamgar and guys like him had absurd handles, but it was street ball game. On the NBA, it didn't translate. Kyrie has translated those level handles.
Plus, back in that era, they would not just go into let a point guard pat the ball if you couldn't shoot. You had to get the ball to the big man or to a wing who was going to score. You couldn't be a little point guard patting the ball and you couldn't shoot the rock.
To championship level on the NBA.
He's a better shot maker.
He's unbelievable. So to have that in New York, my argument is, or my point is, I think he's actually the star of the show in Brooklyn. I think it's Kyrie's team and Kyrie's town now. Let
me tell you something, dude. When Kevin Durant comes back, if he's the player that he was before the injury, which of course is a big if, he's going to be the star. I don't care what anybody says. When Kevin Durant went down, there was an argument over whether or not he was the best player in the NBA. There will never be an argument over whether or not Kyrie Irving is the best player in the NBA. Never. And there's nothing against the brother. I love watching him play. But there will never be an argument for him being the best player in the NBA.
KD. Although KD can do amazing things if he wins a championship here, to me the headline is Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn, Stephen A.
Listen, what I would say to you is the reason why that's probably the case is only because KD's hurt. If KD were healthy, that would not be the case. Regardless
Agreed.
how spectacular Kyrie would be and what have you, Kevin Durant would be that dude. He would be that alpha dude. Because he's injured, Kyrie gets to start off the Brooklyn era without him and put on his own show, paving the way for KD to return. Kyrie is the guy that's going to have you fantasizing even more about KD's return, because what Kyrie's going to do, you're going to sit up there looking at it going like this, damn, we can't wait till KD comes out of the house. That's what it is.
Well, we'll see. Either way, I do believe that Kyrie Irving is going to have a blow up, maybe early in the season next year. But their coach is going to have to put him in his place early. And that's something that Brad Stevens was scared to do. You have to shut Kyrie down and make him understand what his role is. Even if that means sitting him down and saying, Kyrie, we need you to average 9-10 assists this year, to just get his mind in the right place. Maybe this season will be a year where they actually want Kyrie to try to shoot or score more because of the lack of offense with Durant out. But at some point, he's going to have to embrace the fact that he is about 6'2". That means that you have to distribute the basketball. You're not going to lead a team to a championship. Certain people might say, well, what about Allen Iverson? I would say exactly. They lost. As soon as they faced a great team, they lost. And it wasn't even close. So there is no precedent for a player that small leading his squad to a championship. We know, I'll say maybe Steph Curry, but Steph Curry is transcendent. Once again, there's never been a player of that stature as transcendent as Steph Curry. That's a whole other level. But anyway, peace.